I should really revisit that Star Wars retrospective series. Well, it seems it's been nearly a year since that other video. I genuinely wanted this to be a retrospective series, but a certain other video I made kinda made that impossible and killed that entire idea. However, I'm not gonna quit at all with this, and since that new Jedi Survivor game is coming out, I think it's best to dive back into this idea, especially since that game got delayed and I have plenty of time to make these videos. Originally for this video I wanted to cram all three of the other games into this, but since Jedi Survivor was delayed to late April, I decided to narrow it down to one game for part 2, and the last game for part 3. Which I think was a bit of a better idea since it kinda make this one a bit too crammed. And I would also have to crunch for time a lot, which I just don't feel like doing that. In the first video of this retrospective series, I thought that the 2015 reboot of Star Wars Battlefront was a bit of a misstep, but it clearly had a lot of potential providing that they kept on with the formula. The controls were solid, but the game lacked so much content as a whole that it just became unfun. Overall, Battlefront 2015 was mediocre, but it had merits to say the very least. So, with the financial success of Battlefront 2015, EA, with their rights to make Star Wars games, were bound to make more because this is Star Wars, the most influential film series of all time. And also, this is EA. So, of course, they're gonna milk this series after seeing the modicum of financial success of the 2015 game in spite of all the controversy. After Battlefront 2015, they went on to make 3 more games, which I'll cover 1 out of the 3 today. This is my long overdue review of Star Wars Battlefront 2. The 2017 one, yeah, that gets really confusing. First things first, I will not talk about the shitstorm controversy with the microtransactions, as those have been fixed now, and the game is just fine. I'm just gonna review the game for how it is, because that would be a more fair review instead of bitching about something that happened in 2017 to about 2019. The game obviously still has problems at its core, but that doesn't have to deal with the microtransactions that were completely nonsensical. And like I said, it'd be a lot more of a fair review because I'd be judging the game on what it has now, and not the stupid shit that it had at launch. Of course, just like the last one, we're gonna talk about the single player content first. For this game, they actually included a single player campaign this time, but honestly, it's not much to write home about. It's not that fun, but it's at least there, but it honestly really just felt like it was there to fill up space. The gameplay is that of a standard modern shooter campaign, and it's not all that challenging. And it doesn't really have any mechanics or special kind of movement that makes it dynamic or interesting, like something like Titanfall. The story in itself is also just not very good. It's incredibly boring, and I could just not really get invested in any of these characters. And it really sucks that I have to bitch about the single player campaign for this one, because that's what I wanted in the last game. Or at least what we all wanted. So as you can tell, it was clearly very disappointing when everyone just found out that the single player campaign sucks. And of course, we're gonna have the EA single player defenders like, "Oh, well, you complained about it in the last game. Why are you complaining about the fact that there is one in this game?" It's not the fact that there is one, it's just the fact that it sucks. I know it sounds completely insatiable to go from, "This game should have had a single player campaign" to, "Wow, this game's single player campaign sucks." It's not really biting the hand that feeds you, it's just that the game's single player campaign is not very good. It doesn't have any interesting gameplay, any good characters, or memorable moments. The only thing I really remembered from it was that Luke Skywalker was in it. Yay. The campaign itself is just as long as any other first-person shooter campaign, clocking around 6 hours. I will say that at least on launch, they actually fixed the AI this time in a patch from 4 years ago. But it doesn't excuse the fact that the writing and characters and the gameplay here is just not very good. The story itself is bland, but it's just it's fine, I guess. So overall, the campaign is just pretty standard and boring, and has nothing really to it. While I do know that it is 6 hours long, I just didn't even bother finishing it, because I just got so bored halfway through. Or at least more bored than I was at the beginning of the game in the first place. Well, let's move on. Now, yes, the campaign was definitely heavily advertised, but the real meat of this game is the gameplay, or at least the gameplay in the multiplayer. So is it better than it was at launch? Yes, it's actually better by a large margin. The multiplayer gameplay at launch had weird standards for being able to play as heroes and also the pay-to-win nonsense. Thankfully, that's all gone for this version of Battlefront 2. The gameplay is more balanced, the lack of idiotic microtransactions improves the leveling, and also, this game at its core is way more fun than the last game was. Battlefront 2015 was imbalanced because it wanted to be canonically accurate by allowing the Imperials to be an advantage at all times. It literally made people rage quit at launch because it made the Imperials win almost every time. And then when they didn't win, it was just like a stroke of luck on the Rebels side. It didn't really feel like anyone was fairly playing. It just felt like you were just getting matched up with the slightly more advantageous side. In Battlefront 2, they're on equal footing, so it makes things a lot more balanced than last time. It also helps that there's content in this game. You fucking hear that? There's content! Beyond just the typical supremacy, free-for-all, and heroes vs. villains modes, there are also many variations between the soldier game modes and the hero and villain game modes. More so with the soldier one since this is a shooter. I like the more balanced gameplay this time around, and that heroes and villains are actually vulnerable this time if you're not careful instead of just the luck-based win button. There's a lot of stuff here because EA and DICE actually listen to people when they ask for more content. Specifically, content that people actually wanted. I also like the fact that this has more stuff than just adding the sequel characters for the sake of movie synergy and having the Rebels characters. It actually has my favorite era of Star Wars characters, which is the Clone Wars saga. That might be more so because of the Clone Wars cartoons, but you know, agree to disagree, I guess. I'm not really going to go into that rabbit hole as to which is the best Star Wars era. But overall, it just adds a lot of variety to this game and allows it to not get as occasionally boring as the last one. This game has really fun multiplayer modes overall, but I personally feel like at times it can get a little boring. This might just be a little bit more of a me problem, but I don't know. I just don't like this game as much as the original Battlefront 2, because of certain elements like the lightsabers not feeling as heavy in the original, also the single player modes being considerably better, but I'm getting way too ahead of myself. Let's just talk about the visuals. Just like last time, the game looked really good. What I like more about this one is that a lot of the facial animations are a bit more polished. There are still some that look a little unrendered here and there, but I do like the effort this time around a lot more than the last one. As for this game, it still has a few of those issues, but it feels like it's a lot more refined visually. Especially since it's keeping up a 60 FPS frame rate, as most games that run on the Frostbite engine do, and it properly being able to replicate Star Wars iconography that we all love so much. I also really just like how different characters react to being force-choked, which is pretty interesting but somewhat minuscule detail. You know, even though it seems like EA didn't really give a shit about this game, they really did in terms of expanding upon it graphically. But honestly, most companies kind of have to give a shit anyways, because, you know, it sells. And people would be pretty disappointed if it looked like garbage, which I find really ironic because Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite came out in the same year and looked like shit and didn't sell well at all. Something that I don't exactly think I mentioned in the original one was the music. Now, of course, I can't play any of this because they're gonna copyright strike my ass so hard. But I really did think that the inclusion of the original music was pretty good. I don't think it was really all that original because, again, it's just the original music, but, well, it fits and it tickles the nostalgia boners and stuff. Speaking of nostalgia, I'd probably say a lot of the nostalgic elements of the game all come together pretty well. I like the fact that in Supremacy, or whatever the fuck, you can actually have the Clone Wars announcer from the show, and it's pretty good. I really like that inclusion. I also even like the hero character selection screen. I talked about how the normal heroes were not as overpowered in this game, but I didn't really talk about the trooper heroes, basically. I don't know what they're called, but they're basically just legends. They literally have a bunch of things from all the other movies from each era, and hell, even shit from video games. They have Republic Commando? Holy shit. The best part about the nostalgia overall in this game is that it doesn't feel too pandering and it really feels like it's focusing on being a game first and foremost. It doesn't try to be like, oh look, Republic Commando. No, it just shows you that the fact that he's a badass. So it's less like dangling keys in the audience's face and more like, yeah, here's your nostalgia, now go play your fucking game. And the fact that it's well balanced too just makes it all the much better. Oh yeah, and if you really wanted to know about those microtransactions, they're more so used for like cosmetic stuff more than anything. You know, like the typical emotes, costumes, whatever. It's not really all that much different from the original launch, but it's less pay to win, so you're good. Overall, EA's Battlefront 2 was fine. I think it was a massive leap forward from the first game, but still shares some of its issues, like the eventual boredom that you get from playing it, the lack of good single player content, and even though they fixed the lightsaber physics for the heroes, it's still kind of not as smooth as the original games. I think that if this was the first game in this series without the bullshit microtransactions, it would have been received much better, and the series would have been a lot more expansive. The game was honestly not for me, but I thought it was pretty fun and it had its moments. Play this game if you were disappointed with the original and wanted a modern Battlefront experience that was more complete. While yes, this game was much better than the original, by original I mean the 2015 game, well, it's not exactly the true story of redemption yet. Next time, guys. Next time.